I paid $50,000 for a luxury family vacation. At dinner, my uncle called me the Drain King. That's when I realized my family only cared about prestige, so I walked away from them forever. I grew up in a family that lived by two unspoken rules. Status is everything, and appearances are sacred. My parents, Gerald and Nancy Howard, prided themselves on owning a long-standing property management firm in Charleston, the kind of family legacy they liked to brag about at upscale dinners. My older brother Nick was hailed as the golden child, straight-A student, top of his college class, and heir apparent to the business. My younger sister Jade seemed destined for a picture-perfect life, marrying a well-connected attorney and hosting lavish charity galas. Then there was me, Calvin, the middle child who never quite fell in line. Where Nick learned to seal high-stakes property deals and Jade perfected the art of societal networking, I discovered something else entirely, a knack for industrial sanitation. It wasn't glamorous, and my family never failed to remind me of that fact. I started out pumping septic tanks with a used truck and a single partner who believed in me. While my family exchanged refined jokes at fancy gatherings, I was out hustling contracts for waste management, negotiating deals with local factories, and eventually signing multi-year agreements with municipal plants. It was a world away from the polished veneer of the Howard family business, and they never let me forget it. Before we dive into this intense story, we have a small favor to ask. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. It's always incredible to see how far our stories reach. Thank you so much. Now let's dive in. Despite the constant digs, the Drain King, Captain Sewage, and Sludge Lord, I focused on building a real company. My father, Gerald, offered half-hearted suggestions. Why not just come work for us? While my mother, Nancy, couldn't hide her distaste for my dirty profession. Nick would drop lines about how I lacked ambition, and Jade would make sympathetic faces, like I was a pitiful pet with an odd hobby. But I kept my head down and my goals clear. Grow my business, serve my clients well, and prove them all wrong. If not openly, then at least by showing them I didn't need their approval. Over the years, my company, Waterfront Sanitation Inc., expanded beyond anything I'd imagined. We took on bigger commercial projects, forging partnerships that netted me a steady stream of income. Of course, none of them noticed my success. They still saw me as the black sheep, the one who never got with the program. So when I invited them on a lavish family vacation, no one questioned how I could afford it. They assumed it was some fluke or that maybe I'd tapped into their precious family funds. In truth, I paid for every bit of it myself, down to the last bottle of imported champagne. We traveled to Barbados, booking a sprawling oceanfront villa, complete with a private chef, an infinity pool, and a fully stocked wine cellar. For once, I wanted my family to relax in a truly luxurious setting, something I'd earned the right to provide. Little did I know that the baggage of old grievances would come tumbling out at our first formal dinner, courtesy of Uncle Brent, my father's youngest brother and the loudest critic in any room. We were halfway through dinner when Uncle Brent pushed back his chair and raised his glass. Around the polished wood table, my family paused, utensils suspended midair. My father took a slow sip of his wine, my mother kept her eyes on her filet mignon, and my siblings seemed too self-absorbed to notice the sudden hush. "You've always been a failure until we carried you," Uncle Brent declared, projecting his words over the clinking of glasses. A couple of chuckles followed, not because it was genuinely funny, but because it was him, the family's loudest speaker, always certain of his right to judge. My father, Gerald, wore a faint smirk. My mother, Nancy, kept silently cutting her steak, her gaze averted. Meanwhile, Nick and Jade sat there with matching smug looks, like they'd just been delivered an inside joke that everyone but me would understand. I glanced down the table at the people who all claimed to be my family. I had personally paid $50,000 for this luxurious vacation. Every indulgent detail, the private chef, the oceanfront view, the imported wine, came out of my pocket. And yet they still viewed me as the unsuccessful child who never fit into the family's grand plan. I stood up, glass in hand. Conversation halted. My father rested his wine on the table, eyes narrowing slightly. Uncle Brent slowly set his own glass down, waiting. "To everyone who keeps reminding me where I come from," I said. My attempt at a casual tone made a few people snicker, thinking I was playing along. I felt a small, sharp current of anger run through me. "And to me," I added, my voice turning firm, "for footing the bill for this entire trip." You could almost hear their collective disbelief. I continued calmly. 50 grand, the villa, the food, the endless bottles of wine you've been savoring. So let's raise a toast to the failure who apparently managed to pay for all this with hard-earned money from a job you all consider beneath you. Silence. The only noise was the distant rush of the surf. Uncle Brent's grin vanished. Gerald tightened his grip on the stem of his glass, while Nancy finally looked up from her plate. Nick and Jade stared at me like I'd just slapped them. For a moment, no one breathed. I took a slow sip of my drink, savoring their shock. Cheers, I finished, and then I sat down, letting the weight of my words sink in. Dinner didn't taste so good after that, at least not for them. For a long, charged moment, nobody spoke. The waves crashing outside felt louder in the stunned hush of the dining room. Finally, Nick cleared his throat, an obvious attempt to break the tension. He placed his napkin on the table, pushing his plate away. "So," he began stiffly, "this vacation, thank you for, covering it." He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. My father, Gerald, still gripped his wine glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. My mother, Nancy, pressed her lips together in a thin line. Uncle Brent looked like he was about to retort, but something in my expression must have stopped him. I leaned back in my chair, the slow burn of adrenaline still coursing through me. "You're welcome," I said simply. "I just wish you'd shown some of that gratitude before telling me how useless I am." Uncle Brent finally found his voice. "Now hold on," he said, an aggrieved tone creeping into his words. "Nobody's calling you useless. We were just making conversation, joking around." My gaze flicked to him. "A joke?" I echoed. "That's interesting, because it sounded pretty serious to me. You said I've always been a failure until you carried me." I paused. "So, enlighten me. When exactly did you carry me? Before or after I started my own company and signed multi-year contracts you never bothered to ask about?" Silence. Gerald set his wine down carefully, then cleared his throat. "Calvin," he said, "we're all proud that you're doing well, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. You've always been part of this family, and we've always tried to offer you guidance. It's just, you don't approve of my line of work," I cut in, my voice cold. "And yet here we are, enjoying a 5-star villa bought with the money I earned from that exact work." Nancy finally spoke, her voice tinged with a forced calm. "We never said we didn't appreciate you, Calvin. It's just that your profession has never fit with the family legacy. You know how it looks." "How it looks," I repeated, letting out a short laugh. "You mean how you get to brag at country clubs about Nick's high-status deals and Jade's philanthropic soirees while conveniently skipping over the fact that I manage dirty contracts?" Nick's jaw tightened. "You're twisting this," he snapped. "Dad's firm is about prestige, and Jade's events help put our family name in a positive spotlight. That's what we mean by legacy. But come on, man. Managing sewage lines and industrial waste doesn't exactly scream respectable." I smirked. "Respectable enough to pay for your entire meal, and your plane ticket here, and that seafood platter you're enjoying, not to mention the wine you're drinking." Jade shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "We appreciate the gesture," she said in a tight voice, "but you didn't have to do this if you resent us so much." "Resent you?" I shook my head. "I don't resent you. I resent the way you trivialize my work. None of you ever once asked me how I built my company or how much work it took. You all just assumed I was scraping by. Meanwhile, you keep afloat by leaning on Dad's bank account and calling it prestige." Gerald's posture stiffened at the mention of his financial backing. Uncle Brent quickly chimed in. "Let's not make this into a blame game." I turned to him. "You started it the moment you announced to everyone that I'm a failure." That failure comment was the spark. "But it's been building a long time, Uncle Brent. Years of your snide remarks, captain of the cesspools, Duke of Drains." The family found it hilarious. "But guess what? My so-called cesspool contracts are paying for your second glass of that 12-year-aged wine." Brent opened his mouth, then closed it again. He finally glanced down at the table, muttering something under his breath that might have been an apology, though it was too quiet and too late to matter. Gerald inhaled slowly, then lifted his chin. "Son, let's keep things civil. We're in a beautiful place, here together as a family. We should be celebrating, not fighting." My laugh was hollow. "A little late for that." I glanced around the table. "If my work is so beneath you, feel free to book your own accommodations next time. See how far your prestige and legacy get you without enough money to sign the checks." A tense hush followed. Finally, Nancy spoke, her tone wavering. "I think we should all get some rest and continue this conversation tomorrow. The day's been long." I stood up, pushing back my chair. "You can keep talking if you want. I've said my part." Without waiting for their reactions, I placed my napkin on the table and walked out to the villa's expansive terrace. The moonlit view of the ocean was breathtaking, a reminder of how much I'd poured into making this trip perfect. The wind carried a gentle saltiness through the air, a quiet contrast to the charged atmosphere inside. I stood up, pushing back my chair with a screech that echoed across the grand dining room. You can keep talking if you want. I've said my part. A heavy silence followed as I placed my napkin on the table. Without waiting for anyone's reaction, I strode out onto the villa's expansive terrace. The salty sea breeze hit me hard, mixing with the tension still clawing at my chest. The moon cast a silver sheen over the restless waves, stretching into the dark horizon. It should have been peaceful, but all I felt was a roaring storm inside me. Behind me, the sliding doors creaked open. "Calvin, wait!" Nick's voice called, sharp with urgency. "Come on, don't be like this." I didn't turn around. Like what? Honest for once? Nick stepped closer, his polished shoes crunching on the stone tiles. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I whipped around. Proportion? You've been mocking me for years, Nick, all of you. Tonight was just the cherry on top. He faltered, his confident smirk gone, replaced by something more defensive. "We're family, Cal. We've always joked around. Don't make this a thing." "Jokes?" I spat the word. "Every damn joke is a reminder of how little respect you actually have for me. You talk about family like it means something, but all you people care about is prestige. Who looks the best at the table? Who's the most important? And I'm not playing that game anymore." The sliding door opened again. Gerald, my father, walked out, glass of whiskey in hand. His jaw was tight, but he kept his voice calm. "Son, you need to understand, this family has built something over generations. Legacy matters." "Legacy?" I nearly laughed, the sound bitter. "Dad, you call it legacy. But it's just ego wrapped in a bow. You all care more about what strangers think than the people sitting at that table." Nancy, my mother, appeared next to Gerald, her diamond necklace catching the moonlight. "Calvin, we're not dismissing your success," she began, soft-spoken but firm. "But the Howard name stands for more than just making money. It's about respect, community, influence." "Respect?" I echoed, my voice hollow. "Funny how none of that respect ever made its way to me." "Because you chose a path that—" Gerald started but caught himself. "Say it," I demanded. "A path that's beneath you. That's what you all think, isn't it? Sanitation isn't glamorous enough for the Howards." He clenched his jaw tighter but didn't deny it. "You don't get it, Dad. I don't need fancy titles or magazine features. I built something real, and it's made me more successful than you ever thought possible." "Money isn't everything, Calvin," Jade chimed in from the doorway, arms crossed. Her silk dress fluttered in the ocean breeze. "It's about influence, reputation, how people see us." "How people see us," I repeated slowly, the absurdity of it settling in my chest like a weight. "That's all you care about, isn't it? How it looks." She flinched. "You know what? I'm done. I'm done trying to win approval from people who only see me as a paycheck or an embarrassment." "Don't be dramatic," Nancy sighed, rubbing her temples. "Dramatic?" I felt the anger rise again. "I paid for this entire vacation. I gave you this—" I gestured at the sprawling villa, the oceanfront view, the crystal-clear pool glowing in the moonlight. "And you still sit around judging me." Uncle Brent burst through the door, whiskey sloshing in his glass. "Oh, for God's sake, Calvin, you think we're all just bad people now because we didn't kiss your ass?" I glared at him. "No, Brent, I think you're a pompous blowhard who's been riding this family's coattails for too long." He sneered. "You're throwing a tantrum because we called out the truth. You'll always be the kid who works with shit. Doesn't matter how much money you make." I stepped forward, my fists clenched, but before I could speak, Nick raised a hand. "Brent, enough." Uncle Brent scowled, but took a step back, muttering under his breath. Nick turned to me, his voice softer now. "Look, I get it. We've been dicks. We never took your business seriously, but—" "No, but," I snapped. "It's not about the money. It's the principle. This family's addicted to appearances, prestige, status, legacy, whatever fancy word you want to use, but family isn't about that." Gerald spoke again, quieter this time. "Son, I get that you're hurt, but this isn't how we handle things." "Exactly," I said, my voice breaking with emotion. "You handle things by burying the truth under status games and fake smiles." "Well, I'm not playing along anymore." I let the weight of my words hang in the air. The waves crashed louder as if punctuating my final decision. "I don't want to be around people who only value me when I'm useful to them," I continued, breathing hard. "If this family only survives because we all pretend to care, then I don't want it." "Calvin," Nancy started, her voice cracking for the first time. "No," I cut her off. "I'm done." I walked past them, brushing past Gerald and Brent. My footsteps echoed on the marble tiles as I made my way back through the villa. The air felt lighter with every step I took away from that suffocating conversation. As I reached the front door, I paused, feeling the urge to turn back, half expecting someone, anyone, to stop me. But no one did, Instead, I heard Brent's voice, low but bitter. Let him go. He'll come crawling back when he realizes family's all he's got. I smiled to myself, opening the heavy front door. No, Brent, I muttered under my breath. Family's supposed to be the people who stand by you, not the ones who weigh you down. The door shut behind me with a heavy thud, sealing the moment. I stepped out into the cool night, the stars bright and vast above me. The ocean still roared, but now it felt like freedom, a call to something bigger than their shallow legacy. For the first time in my life, I felt unchained, and I didn't look back. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories like this.